It started like any other Tuesday. Coffee brewing, laptop open, the quiet rhythm of a normal morning. I wasn't looking for trouble, just checking our joint account before paying a few bills. But when the numbers loaded, my stomach went cold. The balance was wrong. Not by a little, by everything. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Banks make mistakes, right? I refreshed. Logged out, logged back in. Still the same. $180,000 gone. I stared at the screen like maybe if I blinked hard enough, the numbers would come back. They didn't. I scrolled through the transactions. Then I saw it. TB Consulting. A transfer that size doesn't happen by accident, and TB Consulting wasn't a company I'd ever heard of. I checked the date. 2 days earlier. A Friday the same night, Mark said he was working late. Something in me went still. Not angry, not yet. Just quiet. Because sometimes the truth doesn't hit like thunder. It sinks in like a slow leak. When Mark came home that night, I didn't say a word. He kissed my cheek, asked about dinner, and smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. I watched him pour himself a drink, loosen his tie, and check his phone, the same phone he kept face down every night. I asked casually, "Hey, did you move some money last week? The account looks weird." He didn't even flinch. "Yeah, I transferred some to a new investment fund. You'll see it bounce back soon, don't worry." On it. His tone was smooth, practiced, the same one he used when talking to clients. He even threw in a smile, the kind that used to make me feel safe. Now it felt rehearsed. I nodded, pretending to accept it. "Okay," I said softly. But inside, something cracked. After he went to bed, I pulled up the account again. The more I looked, the clearer it became. The transfers, the timing, the emails. This wasn't random, it was planned. And the initials TB felt like a clue left out in the open. I remembered his new assistant, Tara Benson, the one who laughed a little too loud at his jokes, the one who handled marketing, though I never once saw a brochure. Suddenly, TB Consulting didn't sound like a business. It sounded like her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, staring at the dark window. I thought about the years, the long hours I worked to build our savings, the vacations we didn't take, the dinners I skipped when he said, "We're investing in our future." Turns out, the future had a name. And here's the funny part. I wasn't crying. I didn't even feel heartbroken. I just felt insulted. Like he thought I'd never notice. Like he believed being a quiet wife meant being a blind one. The next morning, I made him breakfast. Same as always. Eggs, coffee, toast. I wanted to see his face when he looked at me, knowing what he'd done. He didn't look guilty. He looked relaxed. Almost relieved. That's when I knew for sure he wasn't sorry. He was confident I'd never catch up. I smiled back. "You look happy today," I said. He grinned. "Big week ahead. I've got everything under control." He really said that. Everything under control. As soon as he left for work, I called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, professional. "Yes, Mrs. Foster, the transfer was authorized under your joint account." "Authorized by who?" I asked. "By your husband," she said. "And it shows the secondary recipient as Tara Benson." I thanked her and hung up. Then I just sat there, staring at the phone, realizing my worst suspicion had turned into proof. My husband didn't just cheat. He used our money to fund it. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream. Instead, I opened my laptop, made a new folder, and named it Documents. Inside, I started saving every screenshot, every email, every bank statement. I didn't know what my plan was yet, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to be the fool in his story. I brewed a fresh cup of coffee, stronger this time, and whispered to myself, "Okay, Mark, let's see who's really in control." Before we move on, tell me, have you ever caught someone lying so smoothly it almost made you doubt yourself? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if you're into real-life cheating stories and revenge stories that hit harder than fiction, make sure to subscribe. Mark thought he could take everything and walk away, smiling. But he was about to learn that silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. And I had been silent long enough. The next morning, the house felt quieter than usual. I made coffee, poured his favorite blend into the travel mug and placed it by the door, like always. The difference was that I wasn't doing it out of love anymore. It was data collection. Every move, every word, every late meeting from now on would be a clue. Mark came downstairs in his usual rush, phone in hand, tie slightly crooked. He kissed my cheek without looking up. "I'll be home late again tonight," he said, scrolling through something. "Client dinner." "Which client?" I asked, not looking at him either. He hesitated for half a second. New investors. You wouldn't know them." "Oh." He left in a hurry, and that half-second pause told me everything I needed to know. The man who used to talk about every invoice suddenly couldn't remember his own investors' names. Once the front door closed, I sat at the table and opened my laptop. It wasn't hard to find his company email. I'd set up half his systems years ago. He never changed the password because why would he? He thought we were a team. Inside, I searched for TB Consulting. Dozens of emails popped up. Contracts. Payment confirmations. One of them had a subject line that said, "Invoice. Personal consultation package." I opened it and froze. It was from Tara's address. The consultation package was the exact amount that vanished from our account. Attached was a receipt. No service listed. Just the words, "Thank you for your continued trust." The level of arrogance almost made me laugh. At noon, I called Lydia Harris. We'd known each other for years, ever since she handled a divorce case for one of my old coworkers. Lydia had that sharp, steady voice that made you believe everything could be fixed if you followed her logic. "Lydia," I said quietly, "I think my husband just committed financial adultery." She didn't even sound surprised. "Tell me what happened." I gave her the short version: the money, the mistress, the fake business. She listened without interrupting, then said, "Don't confront him yet. Gather proof. Keep calm. If this is what it sounds like, we'll handle it the smart way." That word "smart" stuck with me. That night, I played my part. I made dinner, poured wine, asked about his day. He told me about workload stress, how hard it was being the provider, how people took advantage of his generosity. Generosity. That word almost made me choke. He sat across from me, smiling, sipping wine he bought with my paycheck, and I realized how little emotion I felt left for him. I wasn't angry anymore, just aware. Like the curtain had finally lifted, and I could see the man he really was, not a husband, but a performer rehearsing a role. When he went to bed, I stayed up again, combing through his transactions. That's when I noticed something worse. Small, regular payments sent every Friday to Tara's consulting firm, like a weekly paycheck for Betrayal. It was meticulous, almost impressive in its stupidity. By 1 a.m., I had enough evidence to fill a folder. I named it June Statements, neutral enough not to raise suspicion if he ever saw it. I printed the receipts, the email chains, the transfers. I slid them into a brown envelope and hid it under the lining of my desk drawer. The next morning, I greeted him like nothing was wrong. "Good luck with your meeting," I said sweetly. He winked. "Always lucky when I've got you cheering for me." The confidence was nauseating. When he left, I called Lydia again. "It's confirmed," I said. "He's funneling money to her through a fake company." She sighed. "That's not just betrayal, Elaine. That's fraud. We can build a case, but don't let him know you're onto him yet. Men like him think silence means safety. Let's use that." "Understood," I said. "I'll play quiet." The word quiet felt different now, not weakness, but a weapon. That evening, I watched him from across the room. He laughed into his phone, something about contracts closing soon. I knew exactly which contracts he meant. He caught me looking once and smiled, maybe trying to gauge whether I suspected anything. I smiled back. It was probably the last genuine expression of teamwork he'd ever get from me. Later, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in his pocket from a jewelry store downtown. It wasn't my birthday, not our anniversary, not even a random holiday. The line item read, "Diamond bracelet," engraved. I didn't even have to guess. I put it back exactly where I found it, folded the pants neatly, and placed them on his chair. Let him think his secrets were still safe. That illusion was the only thing keeping him careless. and carelessness was going to make him easier to catch. That night, while he slept, I opened his phone. No passcode. A man's ego really is his greatest weakness. There it was, Tara's name, saved under TB. Messages full of hearts, inside jokes, and one that read, "Don't worry, baby. I'll take care of us once it's all moved." All moved. Like I was some obstacle being relocated out of his life. I turned off the phone, placed it back on the nightstand, and lay beside him, wide awake. My mind wasn't spinning in chaos anymore. It was sharp, quiet, and precise. If he thought I was the type of woman who'd break down, he was about to be very disappointed. Morning came, and with it, a strange calm. He went off to work again, same smile, same cologne, same lies. I brewed my coffee, opened my laptop, and started building a timeline. Dates, amounts, patterns, phone logs, every detail mattered. Because the perfect marriage had already cracked wide open, and I wasn't planning to fix it, I was planning to expose it. He believed he'd buried the truth deep enough that I'd never find it, but I'd already started digging, and I was nowhere near done. The first time I opened a voice recorder app on my phone, I realized how calm my hands were. It wasn't nerves anymore, it was focus. Every conversation, every casual lie that came out of his mouth, I was going to keep it. Not for drama, not for confrontation, but for evidence. That morning, I called Lydia again. "He's not being careful," I said. "He thinks I still believe him." "Good," she replied. "Let him. Keep collecting. Once he's comfortable, he'll make mistakes." I liked the sound of that. Let him make mistakes. At work, I was quiet, but efficient. My coworkers probably thought I was just tired. They didn't know I was building a case file that could burn a marriage and a company at the same time. By the third day, I'd memorized his routine. Gym at 6, work by 8, meetings, until late evening. I waited until he left one morning, then drove straight to the bank. The clerk greeted me with the kind of bright, professional smile people use when they're about to tell you bad news politely. I asked for the full transaction history on our joint accounts. She hesitated until I mentioned my credentials: senior accountant, co-owner of the account. When she slid the papers across the counter, my pulse didn't even spike. I'd expected it. Dozens of transfers, Tara Benson's name, different amounts each week. Even a line that read, "Joint authorization pending." That one made my jaw tighten. Joint authorization meant he'd tried to add her to our financial profile. I thanked the clerk, walked out, and sat in my car. The parking lot was hot and blinding, but inside the car, it felt cold. I stared at those pages for a long minute, and then said it out loud. He really thinks he owns me. That was the last time I ever felt powerless. That evening, I cooked his favorite dinner: grilled salmon, garlic butter, white wine. He came home smiling, loosened his tie, kissed my cheek again. Same script, same actor. I played my role just as smoothly. "How was your day?" he asked. "Productive," I said. "Yours?" He laughed. "Busy. The market's insane, but things are moving forward. We're almost at the finish line." The finish line. I had no doubt what he meant. He scrolled through his phone while I poured him another glass. That's when I slid my own phone closer, recording every word. He bragged about transfers, consultations, and new beginnings. He didn't say her name, but he didn't need to. The arrogance filled in the blanks. I saved the file, labeled it "Dinner Talk." After he went to bed, I emailed Lydia everything: scans of the bank papers, screenshots, the voice recording. She called the next morning. "This is enough to start," she said. "But don't file yet. We'll wait until he ties the rope himself." "What do you mean?" "He'll eventually sign something stupid. A power of attorney, a fake business transfer. Let him hang himself with paperwork." Her tone was calm, clinical. I appreciated that. It made the whole thing feel less like heartbreak and more like strategy. Days turned into weeks. I collected more data, each piece a thread. I learned to smile when I wanted to scream. I learned to nod when he lied straight to my face. I was patient, methodical, invisible. He mistook it for forgiveness. One Friday, while folding laundry, his phone buzzed on the counter. Tara's name lit up the screen. I picked it up, pretending not to notice, and read the preview text before it faded. Got the joint paperwork ready. Can't wait for our trip. Trip. Joint paperwork. The puzzle was complete. That night, I poured him a drink and asked, "When's our next vacation? We haven't had one in forever." He looked caught off guard for a second, then smiled. "Soon, babe. I'm just waiting for the right time to surprise you." His lies were getting lazy. I nodded, sipped my wine, and said, "You're good at surprises." When he laughed, I did too. But in my head, I was already setting up a new drive labeled Case Materials. Inside it, every transaction, every text, every date. I even printed duplicates and stored them at Lydia's office. By now, I knew how men like Mark worked. They think love is compliance, and silence is consent. What they never expect is silence that plans. The next week, I met Lydia downtown at a quiet coffee shop. We spread the papers between us like a crime scene. "This," she said, tapping the line with Tara's name, "is where we'll hit him. Fraudulent transfer of marital assets." I nodded. "What happens if he moves the rest?" "Then he's just making our case stronger." I sat back and took a sip of coffee. "Good. Let him keep digging." The corner of Lydia's mouth lifted. "You're not like most of my clients." "Because I'm not here to cry about him," I said. "I'm here to bankrupt him legally." That night, Mark came home later than usual. He smelled like expensive perfume, not mine. His shirt was untucked, his smile careless. "Long day," he said. "Yeah," I answered. "Mine too." I went upstairs, left him in the kitchen, and looked in the mirror. There wasn't anger anymore, just clarity. That kind of stillness you feel before a storm starts. Except this time, I was the storm. While he watched TV downstairs, I wrote in my notebook, Step 1. Confirm Tara's role. Step 2. Get joint account access logs. Step 3. Wait for the paperwork. Step 8. Execute quietly. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and lay in bed listening to the faint noise of his laughter drifting up from below. He thought everything was going according to his plan. He just didn't realize I was already running mine. The next Monday, I parked outside his office earlier than usual. The building had glass walls that reflected the morning sun, the kind of place where people walked fast and smiled too much. I waited in the car until I saw her. Tara Benson. She stepped out of a black SUV wearing a dress that probably cost half a paycheck and sunglasses big enough to hide a conscience. She walked like she owned the place, phone in hand, laughing at something. I recognized the tone immediately, the same one Mark used when he thought he was charming. She didn't see me, and I preferred it that way. I just wanted to study her, the face behind the theft. When I finally stepped inside the lobby, the receptionist smiled politely. "Good morning, Mrs. Foster. Mr. Foster's in a meeting. Do you want to wait?" I returned the smile. "No, I'll just drop something off." Tara appeared down the hallway before the receptionist could respond. Our eyes met. That moment was almost cinematic. Her smirk, my silence. She recognized me instantly, but instead of shame, there was amusement in her face. "Mrs. Foster," she said, her voice sugar-coated. "You look lovely today." "Thank you," I said evenly. "You too. Expensive taste suits you." She blinked, unsure whether to smile or defend herself. I walked closer, handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a fake client file, blank pages. She didn't know that. "Be sure Mark gets this," I said. "It's important." I walked away before she could answer. Her perfume lingered in the air, too sweet, too desperate. Back in the car, I smiled for the first time in days. Seeing her wasn't rage-inducing. It was educational. She wasn't some irresistible siren. She was just ordinary and reckless. That night, Mark came home a little earlier than usual, maybe to preempt my questions. "Ran into Tara today," I said while setting the table. He froze. The kind of pause you'd miss if you weren't watching for it. "Oh yeah? At the office?" "Mm-hmm," I said, cutting vegetables. She said hi. He forced a smile. "Oh, she's nice. Efficient, too." "Efficient," I repeated, looking up. "That's one word for it." He didn't respond. During dinner, he acted normal again. Stories about clients, deadlines, the usual corporate noise. I matched his tone perfectly. Two actors in a play neither of us wanted to admit was fiction. After dinner, while he showered, I opened his briefcase. It was full of contracts, a tablet, and an expensive perfume sample. Not mine. I put everything back in place. Evidence was valuable, but timing was priceless. The next day, Lydia called. I spoke with a contact at the bank, she said. They confirmed a joint authorization request between Mark Foster and Tara Benson. My grip on the phone tightened. So she's officially trying to attach herself to my finances. Not yet finalized, Lydia said, but close. If you want to stop it, now's the time. I thought for a moment. No, I said. Let them finish. The more he signs, the deeper he goes. That afternoon, I stopped by the office again, this time unannounced. Tara was in the hallway, talking to one of Mark's project managers. When she saw me, her expression flickered a second of panic, then composure. Back again? She said lightly. You must really love this place. Not really, I said. I just like to see where my money's going. Her smile faltered. I could see it the crack. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. I don't know what you think you know, but... Oh, Tara. I cut her off softly. I don't think. I calculate. I left her standing there, red-faced, holding her phone like a lifeline. That evening, Mark tried to act affectionate. Rough day? He sighed, sitting next to me. Office politics. Yeah, I can imagine, I said. Some people just don't know their place. Hem. He laughed nervously, not catching the blade in my words. Later that night, I checked the tracking software I'd installed on our shared laptop. Every email Mark sent from that computer now copied to my cloud folder. It wasn't illegal. It was marital transparency, as Lydia called it. One message caught my eye. Subject: Vacation plans, Cayman. Attached: Hotel reservations for 2, first-class flights, and a wire transfer confirmation for $12,000 to TB Consulting. End of 4. So that was the finish line. A trip to paradise paid for with betrayal. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and let the anger pass. Because anger wastes energy, and I'd need mine soon. The next morning, while he showered, I placed that printed email under his phone just visible enough to make him sweat. When he came downstairs, he saw it immediately. What's this? He asked. Something you left open last night, I said calmly, buttering my toast. Thought you might need it for your investment trip. He blinked, realizing too late that he'd been caught halfway. Elaine, it's not what it looks like. Oh, I hope not, I said, smiling faintly. Because it looks pretty pathetic. He tried to speak again, but I stood up, gathered my bag, and said, I have a meeting. Try not to move any more money today, okay? His face turned pale. You're overreacting. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm reacting to facts. I left the house without slamming the door. Slamming is for people who still care. When I reached my car, I checked my phone. Lydia had sent a short text. Documents ready. Just say when. I didn't respond yet, because I knew something Mark didn't. His downfall wasn't coming from rage. It was coming from precision, and I was almost done calculating. By the time the sun came up the next day, the anger had worn off. What was left was precision. The kind that comes after you stop trying to understand why someone betrayed you and start focusing on how to make it cost them everything. I spent the morning at my desk with a legal pad, organizing every piece of evidence I had. Bank transfers, emails, screenshots, even the dinner recording where he bragged about new investments. I numbered each page, attached dates, and made a timeline so clean it could pass an IRS audit. Lydia called around noon. You ready? She asked. I've been ready since he moved the first $1, I said. We met at her office, a quiet corner suite overlooking downtown Austin. Lydia wore that calm, predatory smile lawyers get when they smell victory. She skimmed through my documents, tapping her pen against the table. This isn't just infidelity, she said. This is a financial crime inside a marriage. You have enough here for a full forensic claim. I leaned back. So how do we do this without him knowing? She smiled. We build it like he built his lies quietly, and one piece at a time. Over the next hour, She mapped out the legal framework. We'll need to file a discovery motion once we're ready. But before that, I want proof of the joint authorization attempt. The bank can confirm it if you request it formally. I'll write the wording. When I left her office, I felt lighter, not because the problem was gone, but because I finally had a plan sharper than his lies. That night, Mark came home cheerful. He kissed me, poured himself whiskey, and started talking about upcoming expansion projects. I listened, nodded, even asked questions. Every word went into my mental file. At one point he said, "You know, Elaine, I've been thinking about consolidating accounts. It'll make things cleaner." "Cleaner?" I asked, pretending to think. "Sounds efficient." He smiled like I'd just approved his next heist. When he went upstairs, I texted Lydia. "He's planning consolidation. Timeline's accelerating." She replied, "Good. The faster he moves, the easier to prove intent." The next few days were a test of patience. I played my part flawlessly. Sweet, calm, predictable. I cooked his meals, asked about his meetings, even complimented his tie. Men like Mark feed off comfort. The more secure they feel, the sloppier they get. On Wednesday, he left his laptop open while taking a shower. I plugged in a flash drive, copied everything in under 5 minutes, and ejected it cleanly. Inside his email drafts, I found a message to Tara. "Once the transfer clears, I'll close the joint account. She won't see it coming." He was right about one thing. I didn't see it coming. But I saw the ending now. That night, I printed the message, sealed it in a new envelope marked Exhibit 3, and placed it next to my growing stack. Then I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee while he watched TV, and smiled quietly. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with the bank under my name only. When the manager confirmed my identity, I asked directly, "Has there been any recent request for joint authorization on our account?" He hesitated before nodding. "Yes, Mrs. Foster. It was initiated by Mr. Foster with a secondary signer, a Miss Benson." I smiled politely. "Thank you. Please note that I do not consent to any changes without my written authorization." He nodded, slightly uncomfortable. "Of course, ma'am." Walking out, I felt the kind of composure that only comes from reclaiming control. For months, he'd been rewriting the rules of our marriage behind my back. Now, I was rewriting the ending. That evening, Mark noticed something in my tone. "You seem different lately," he said while eating dinner. I shrugged. "Maybe I'm just learning to pay attention." He laughed like it was a joke. "You always notice everything, Elaine. That's why I love you." End of 4. If irony could pay bills, that line would have made me rich. After dinner, I excused myself and called Lydia from the car. "Everything's in motion," I said. "He's one step away from finalizing it." "Perfect," she replied. "By the time he signs that last form, we'll have the full record ready for the court. He thinks he's transferring money, but legally, he's transferring guilt." I couldn't help but smile. "I'll drink to that." Back home, Mark was already asleep, snoring softly. I looked at him for a moment, the man I used to love, now reduced to a case file and a lesson. Betrayal ages differently when you stop feeling it and start studying it. I checked my phone one last time. Lydia had sent a short message. "Remember, the best revenge is built like a ledger line by line until the balance evens out." I locked my phone, turned off the light, and let the thoughts settle. Revenge didn't have to be loud. It could be methodical, professional, clean. And if there's one thing I've always been good at, it's balancing accounts. By the time morning came, I had already drafted my own version of closure, and it started with his signature. The call came just after lunch on a Tuesday. I was finishing a report when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I'd let it go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. "Mrs. Foster?" The voice was professional, polite. "This is Jessica from First Austin Bank. I just wanted to confirm the new joint authorization you approved for Mr. Foster and Miss Benson." For a second, I didn't say anything. The words hit like a clean punch, sharp, fast, final. My heart didn't even race. It just stopped caring about pretending. I said as calmly as I could, "Can you repeat that?" "Yes, ma'am," she said. "A joint authorization request between your husband, Mr. Mark Foster, and Miss Tara Benson. It appears to have been initiated yesterday. We're just waiting for the secondary approval. I cut her off gently. That won't be happening. Please note that I, Elaine Foster, do not authorize any joint access, additional signers, or new accounts. Effective immediately. She hesitated. Understood, Mrs. Foster. I'll mark it down right now. When the call ended, I stared at the wall. My hands were steady. My breathing was steady. Everything was steady, except the part of me that used to believe in us. That part had officially expired. I walked over to the desk, opened the folder labeled Case Materials, and added a note. Date: Tuesday, 2:14 p.m. Event: Unauthorized joint account request. Status: Denied. Then I opened my laptop and logged into the account. Sure enough, there it was, pending authorization. His name, her name, my money. I took screenshots of everything, downloaded PDFs, and stored them in 3 different drives. I wasn't leaving any room for error. If Mark wanted to play financial chess, fine. I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, he came home humming. He poured himself a drink, loosened his tie, and said, "You wouldn't believe the week I've had." "Oh?" I said without looking up from my screen. "Try me." He leaned against the counter, grinning. "Everything's coming together. Just a few more steps and the new deal's locked in." I looked up at him, smiling faintly. "Must feel nice to have things under control." He laughed. "You know me, always on top of it." And he didn't notice the file name open on my laptop behind the email window. Mark Foster, Fraud Evidence, PDF. He kissed my forehead and went upstairs to shower. I sat there, listening to the sound of the water, wondering how it felt to be that confident while standing on quicksand. Later, when he was asleep, I sat in bed beside him and drafted an email to Lydia. Subject: Bank confirmation. He tried to add Tara to the account. "It's documented, screenshots attached." I blocked it. Her reply came fast, even at midnight. "Good work. He's moving faster. That means he's nervous. Don't stop him, just make sure he leaves fingerprints everywhere." The next morning, I drove to the bank in person. Jessica, the same woman from the call, met me in her office. I thanked her for the heads up. "If anything like that happens again," I said, "call me directly, even if it's marked confidential." She nodded, eyes sympathetic. "I understand, Mrs. Foster. We see this more often than you'd think." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it confirmed what I already knew: this wasn't unique. Just another husband, another ego, another lie built on spreadsheets and trust. When I got home, Mark was still at work. The quiet of the house felt heavier now, but not painful, just clear. I poured coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and mapped the next phase of my plan. Print physical evidence. Secure personal funds. Redirect future deposits into a separate account. Record everything. It wasn't rage anymore. It was logistics. That evening, I received another email, this time from Tara's address. No subject line, just a single sentence. "You really should talk to your husband before you embarrass yourself." I laughed out loud. She'd finally realized she wasn't invisible. I forwarded it to Lydia with the note, "She's nervous. That's good." Then I replied directly to Tara, "You're right. I did talk to him. You should too while you still can." No exclamation marks, no threats, just a quiet fact. That night, Mark acted distant, maybe sensing the shift. He avoided eye contact during dinner. "You okay?" he asked finally. I met his gaze. "I'm great," I said, "just watching everything fall into place." He smiled uneasily and nodded, not realizing that for the first time I wasn't lying. After he went to bed, I logged into the secure folder Lydia had set up and uploaded the day's files. Each document felt like a brick in a wall he didn't know existed, one that would soon box him in completely. The house was silent, except for the hum of the fridge. I sat there with my coffee cooling beside me and thought about how betrayal changes people. It doesn't just break your heart, it rewires your instincts. It teaches you how to move like a predator in your own home. When I finally stood up to turn off the lights, I caught a glimpse of our wedding photo on the wall. The smiles looked genuine, but I could see the lie now: the subtle arrogance in his posture, the trust in mine. One had aged better than the other. I left the picture hanging. It wasn't sentimentality. It was evidence of what I'd overcome. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Another number from the bank. This time, I didn't hesitate to answer. The evening started too perfectly. The table was set with white china, a bottle of Merlot breathing on the counter, candles burning low. It looked like a scene out of one of those glossy lifestyle magazines, the kind that always pretends love can be repaired with ambiance. But this dinner wasn't for love. It was for clarity. Mark thought it was a reconciliation. I told him I wanted to talk things through, and he jumped at the idea like a man desperate to save face, not marriage. What he didn't know was that I'd also invited one more guest. When Tara arrived, she looked confused for exactly 3 seconds before covering it with a practiced smile. "Elaine," she said brightly, "what a surprise." "Oh, I bet," I replied. "Come in." Mark's face drained of color the second she stepped through the door. "Tara," he stammered. "What are you—" I interrupted smoothly. "I thought since we all seem to share so much lately, we should share a meal too." He opened his mouth to argue, but I gestured toward the table. "Dinner's ready. Let's make it civilized." They sat across from each other like two actors caught mid-scene without their scripts. I poured the wine, slow and deliberate. The sound of the liquid hitting the glass was the loudest thing in the room. Mark cleared his throat. "Elaine, this isn't appropriate." "Neither was the transfer to TB Consulting," I said, placing his glass down. Tara's fork froze midair. Mark blinked, trying to play dumb. "I told you, that's just business." "Business," I repeated, sliding a folder across the table. Inside, printed emails, bank transfers, the hotel booking to the Cayman Islands. "Then I guess the IRS will love your business. They appreciate detailed records." His hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. Tara's expression flickered from smug to sick. "You went through my accounts?" Mark snapped. "Our accounts," I corrected. "You moved our money. I just followed it home." He glanced at Tara, searching for support, but she was busy staring at the paperwork like it was a death certificate. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, his voice breaking into that defensive pitch liars use when they realize the room is no longer on their side. "Mark," I said softly, "I'm an accountant. It's exactly what it looks like." The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Tara finally spoke. "You can't just—" I looked at her, calm as glass. "Tara, you should probably focus on clearing your schedule. Legal hearings can be time-consuming." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood abruptly, muttering something about not needing this drama, and stormed toward the door. I didn't stop her. She'd already done enough walking away from things that weren't hers. Mark stayed seated, staring at the folder like it might rearrange itself into a confession that made him look smarter. When he finally looked up, his voice was barely a whisper. "You planned this." "Of course," I said. "You thought I'd cry," I calculated. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. "You're overreacting. I made a mistake." I smiled faintly. "You made many. I just started keeping score." He stood up, pacing. "You could ruin everything, Elaine." I tilted my head. "That depends. What's everything exactly? Your company? Your reputation? The illusion that you're a decent man?" He slammed his hand against the table. "You don't understand what this means for me." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You stole from your own household to impress a woman who can't spell consulting. That's not ambition, Mark. That's stupidity." He fell silent again, breathing heavily. Then, like every coward who's been cornered, he tried to shift blame. "You pushed me to this. You were always so controlling." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "Controlling? Because I paid the bills? Because I noticed when numbers didn't add up? You didn't hate control, Mark. You hated accountability." The clock ticked behind us, steady and merciless. He sank back into his chair, defeated but still too proud to apologize. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said. "That's the point. You've already given me everything I need." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can destroy me?" I picked up my wineglass and swirled the last sip. "Destroy you? No. You've been doing that on your own. I'm just here to file the paperwork." He didn't know it yet, but I had already forwarded copies of those documents to Lydia, time-stamped and notarized. Tonight wasn't for confrontation. It was for confirmation. I wanted him to see the moment the ground beneath him cracked and know it was his own doing. As he sat there in silence, I gathered the plates one by one. "Dinner's over," I said quietly. So is my silence. I turned away to place the dishes in the sink. Behind me, I heard his voice small, strained, desperate. "Elaine, please. We can fix this." I didn't turn around. "The funny thing about trust," I said, "is once you move it out of a shared account, it doesn't bounce back." The sound of his breathing filled the room, shallow and panicked. I rinsed a plate, set it on the rack, and added, almost casually, "By the way, the bank called today. They'll be reaching out to confirm some things about your joint authorization. Be sure to answer honestly." When I finally turned, his face was pale, eyes wide with the kind of fear only guilt can create. I blew out the candles, one by one, until the room went dark except for the faint reflection of his stunned expression in the window. The quiet between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything he'd broken, and everything I'd already rebuilt inside myself. The next morning began like nothing had happened, at least for him. Mark left the house whistling, dressed in his usual press suit and hollow confidence. But I knew something he didn't. The first domino had already tipped. Around 10 a.m., Lydia called. Her tone was cool but sharp, the way it always was when she had good news that wasn't really good for the other side. "Elaine," she said, "I spoke with my contact at the bank. The investigation is officially open. The IRS was alerted automatically because of the flagged transactions. Your husband's about to have a very inconvenient week." I exhaled slowly. Perfect. By noon, things began to move faster than I expected. My phone buzzed again, this time from the bank's fraud department. They asked a few questions, confirmed my identity, then informed me that multiple irregular transfers had been temporarily frozen pending review. "Will my husband be notified?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," the agent said. "He should receive an email and a formal letter today." I smiled. "He'll love that." When Mark got home that night, the energy in the house had shifted. He walked in quieter than usual, his face pale, eyes darting. "We've got a problem," he said. I set my fork down gently. "Do we?" "The bank?" he muttered. "They froze some of our accounts. They're claiming there's a transfer issue." I pretended to look confused. "That's strange. Maybe they flagged one of your new investments?" He glared at me. "You think this is funny?" I kept my expression neutral. "I think it's predictable." He grabbed his phone, pacing the kitchen. "They said they'll need to review the authorization logs. Something about IRS involvement." "Oh?" I interrupted softly. "That sounds serious." He stared at me like I'd just confessed to something, but I didn't flinch. "Elaine," he said slowly, "what did you do?" I took a sip of water and met his eyes. "You moved our money, Mark. I just made sure someone noticed." His face twisted. "You called the IRS?" I shrugged. "I didn't have to. The system did." He slammed his hand on the counter, sending the salt shaker flying. "You've destroyed everything." "No, Mark," I said evenly. "You did that the moment you signed her name next to yours." He stormed out of the room, muttering curses under his breath. I didn't chase after him. There was nothing left to chase. The next day, his office called. His assistant, the new one, sounded uneasy. "Mrs. Foster, do you know if Mark's available? He hasn't been in all day. The company's accounts have been locked." I thanked her and hung up. That was confirmation enough. Lydia texted me an hour later. "IRS initiated audit. Bank cooperation confirmed. The walls are closing in." By that evening, Mark was sitting in his home office surrounded by paperwork, hair disheveled, phone glued to his ear. "There has to be a mistake," he kept saying. Those were legitimate business transfers. He caught me watching from the doorway and snapped, "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" I folded my arms. "No, Mark. I'm remembering." "Remembering what?" "What it felt like to believe someone who looked me in the eye and lied." "Oh, where?" He turned away, muttering something about lawyers and fixing it. Later, I overheard him on the phone with Tara. His voice was low and urgent. "Don't contact me for a while," he said. "They're looking into everything." There was a pause, then he hissed. "No, I didn't tell her anything. Just stay quiet." I walked past the office door deliberately, so he'd know I heard. He hung up immediately. "This isn't over," he said. "It is for you," I replied. 2 days later, Lydia called again. "You'll like this part," she said. "The IRS requested a meeting. They're investigating potential corporate misappropriation. Mark's company is temporarily under review." Meaning? Meaning his accounts are frozen, his business transactions are under scrutiny, and Tara's signature on that fake invoice just made her an accomplice. I smiled faintly. Karma finally got dressed for work. That night, Mark came home later than usual. No suit jacket, no swagger. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, rubbing his forehead. "They're suspending my access," he said quietly. "Everything's locked, even the company card." I looked at him, calm but curious. "That must be difficult." He nodded, eyes glassy. "Elaine, I made mistakes, but we can fix this if you help me." "Help you?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "Mark, you made me an unwilling business partner in fraud. The only help I can offer is moral clarity." He winced. "You don't have to make this worse." "I don't have to do anything," I said. "That's the beauty of it." He looked broken then, not from guilt, but from loss of control. The man who once treated me like a background character was now a supporting role in his own downfall. The next morning, Lydia confirmed what I already suspected. "They're coming for a full audit," she said. "Once that's done, we file the divorce papers. You'll walk away clean and wealthy." Untouched. As she spoke, I glanced around the house. The same walls that had once held his voice now held silence, and it felt better that way. Later that day, I received a final update from the bank. All fraudulent transfers have been reversed pending investigation. I took a deep breath. The numbers that once symbolized betrayal now represented closure. When Mark came home, he found me reading by the window. "The accounts," he said hoarsely. "They froze everything. Even my company line." "Juan," I turned a page calmly. "Guess karma doesn't accept excuses as currency." He stood there, motionless, finally realizing what it meant to lose everything he thought was his. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "Dinner's in the fridge," and went upstairs. There's a special kind of justice that doesn't need a courtroom. Sometimes it wears a business suit and carries a calculator, and sometimes it answers the phone at the right moment. By the time the audit wrapped up, Mark was a shell of the man who once strutted through life like he owned it. His suits didn't fit anymore, his phone barely rang, and his ego, once the loudest thing in any room, had gone silent. The official divorce filing came on a Monday morning. Clean, clinical, 12 pages of legal detachment. Lydia handled everything. She was precise, unemotional, and efficient, which made her the perfect contrast to the chaos Mark had created. He was served at the office, in front of his board. I didn't ask for that, but karma has its own flair for timing. According to Lydia, he looked like someone had drained the blood right out of him. That evening, he showed up at the house unannounced. He stood on the porch, eyes hollow, holding the papers in one hand and a half-empty bottle of whiskey in the other. I opened the door, but only halfway. "You shouldn't be here," I said. He leaned against the frame, the smell of regret pouring off him. "Elaine, please. We can talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You had your say when you moved our money." He ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "I was trying to fix things. I thought I could." "Control them?" I finished. "That's your favorite word." He sighed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "I messed up. I know I did. But this is going to ruin me." I crossed my arms. "You should have thought about that before you tried to ruin me first." His eyes filled with a bitterness that almost looked like tears. But not quite. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," I said quietly. "But I am finished apologizing for things I didn't do." He looked past me into the house, the home he'd abandoned emotionally long before the affair. "This used to be ours," he said softly. "It used to be," I agreed. "Now it's mine." He didn't say another word, just stared for a moment, then turned and walked to his car. The tires crunched against the gravel, a fitting soundtrack for the sound of an ending that had been long overdue. The next day, Lydia and I sat in her office signing the final documents. She explained the settlement terms. I kept the house. I received 65% of the assets. His company's shares were liquidated to cover the misappropriation losses. And the court formally recognized financial deception as grounds for divorce. In other words, he lost everything he'd tried to hide. Lydia slid the final page toward me. Sign here, Elaine. I hesitated for just a moment, not because I doubted the decision, but because I wanted to remember the feeling, the quiet strength of choosing myself. Then I signed. When it was done, Lydia smiled faintly. Congratulations. You're officially free. Amen? Free, I repeated, the word feeling new on my tongue. On the way home, I stopped at the same cafe Mark and I used to go to years ago. I ordered coffee for one and sat by the window. The same table, the same light, but a completely different woman. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You got what you wanted. Hope it was worth it. No name, but I didn't need one. I smiled, locked the screen, and went back to my coffee. A week later, Lydia called with one last update. He's agreed not to contest the divorce, she said. Too much heat from the IRS and his board. He's lucky they're not pressing charges. Lucky, I said. That's one word for it. I spent that afternoon cleaning out the last of his things. A few shirts, a stack of old books, a cufflink box engraved with his initials. Each item went into a donation bag. No ceremony, no anger, just release. In the closet, I found a small envelope taped behind one of the drawers. Inside was a photo of us from our early years, smiling, young, full of belief. I looked at it for a long time before tearing it in half and dropping it into the trash. Some memories deserve to fade quietly. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and called Lydia. You ever celebrate a divorce? I asked. She laughed. Once or twice. Why? Because I think I just might. We toasted over the phone, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for being happy. The next morning, I met with my financial advisor, who looked genuinely impressed with the records I'd kept. You saved yourself a fortune, he said. Most people would have been wiped out before realizing it. I smiled. I've always liked numbers. They don't lie. He chuckled. Well, Mrs. Foster, your ex might disagree. Ex, I repeated. I like how that sounds. When I left the office, the air felt lighter. I walked down the street without that invisible weight on my shoulders, the one made of loyalty and habit and denial. I stopped at a florist on the corner and bought a single white lily. The woman behind the counter smiled. Special occasion? Yeah, I said. Freedom. That evening, as the sun set over Austin, I placed the flower in a vase by the kitchen window. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. Later, while cleaning up the dinner dishes, I caught my reflection in the window, older, sharper, calmer. A woman who had been betrayed, yes, but also one who had rebuilt herself piece by piece without losing her grace. I turned off the lights and let the silence settle around me. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace, the kind that comes after a storm when you finally realize you've made it through. And somewhere out there, Mark was probably sitting in an apartment filled with echoes of what used to be control. But control is only power when someone still believes in it. I didn't anymore. I believed in something better. Freedom doesn't look like fireworks or champagne. It looks like quiet mornings where the coffee tastes stronger and your phone doesn't buzz with panic. A month after the divorce was finalized, the house started to feel like mine again. I changed the locks, repainted the living room, and replaced the framed wedding photos with art I actually liked. The silence that once felt heavy now felt earned. I found myself waking earlier, walking to the park near the lake, just as the city started to hum awake. For the first time in years, I could breathe without wondering what kind of lie was waiting at home. Money wasn't a problem. Lydia had made sure the settlement left me with more than enough. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about ownership, not of a house, not of assets, but of myself. I remember sitting on the porch one morning, sunlight catching on my coffee cup, and realizing I hadn't thought about Mark in days. That's when I knew healing had started. Not when the anger fades, but when the thought of them doesn't interrupt your peace anymore. Later that week, Lydia called to check in. You should do something with what you've learned, she said. Like what? Write a book called How to Divorce a Fraudulent Husband Without Losing Your Mind? She laughed. I mean it. You'd be surprised how many women get blindsided by financial betrayal. You could help them. Her words stuck. That night, I opened my laptop and started drafting ideas. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted impact. So I started sketching the outline of something called The Second Ledger, a small financial advisory group for women dealing with deceit in marriage. It began as a simple thought. Within weeks, it became a registered business. I rented a modest office downtown, set up a website, and used the skills I'd built over 20 years of accounting to give other women what I never had: information before disaster. The first client was a nurse named Monica. Her husband had drained their savings to fund a crypto project with a coworker who, surprise, was also his mistress. She came to me shaking, embarrassed, angry. I didn't give her pity. I gave her a plan. By the end of our third meeting, she had her finances separated, legal counsel retained, and a look in her eyes I recognized the look of someone realizing she wasn't powerless anymore. Word spread. The second ledger grew faster than I expected. Women came with stories, different details, same heartbreak. I saw versions of myself in every single one of them. One afternoon, a local journalist reached out after hearing about my work. She wanted to feature me in an article about women reclaiming their financial independence. During the interview, she asked, "What motivated you to start this?" I paused for a moment. "Revenge," I said honestly. "But not the kind people think. The best revenge is living in control and at peace." The article went viral, mostly because of that quote. Messages poured in from women across the country, wives, mothers, even retirees who'd lost their life savings to trust. Each one had a story, and I read every message. But the one that hit hardest was from a woman named Dana. She wrote, "You made me realize I'm not stupid for believing someone I loved. I'm smart for finally believing myself." That night, I sat in my office long after everyone left, rereading her message over and over. I realized that all the anger that used to drive me had quietly transformed into purpose. A few months later, the Second Ledger hosted its first workshop. 20 women showed up, nervous and hopeful. We talked about bank security, joint accounts, asset protection, emotional manipulation, all the things polite society never teaches you until it's too late. At the end of the session, I told them, "You can lose money, you can lose trust, you can lose people, but don't ever lose yourself. Everything else can be rebuilt." The room went quiet, then someone clapped. Then everyone did. It wasn't applause for me, it was for themselves, for surviving. Afterward, one woman stayed behind. She was in her early 30s, pale and tired. "How long did it take," she asked softly, "before you stopped being angry?" I thought about that for a while. "You don't stop being angry," I said. "You just stop letting anger be the loudest voice in the room." She nodded, eyes wet, and whispered, "Thank you." When I got home that night, the house glowed warm under the soft kitchen lights. I poured a glass of wine, sat at the table, and realized I didn't feel alone. The ghosts of betrayal had finally packed up and left. I looked around at the photos on the wall, the files on my laptop, the calendar filled with meetings. Everything was mine again. The next morning, I walked into my office early, coffee in hand, the city just waking up. My assistant looked up and smiled. "Big day today," she said. "What's happening?" I asked. "CNN just called. They want to interview you live about the Second Ledger." I laughed. "Of course they do. Karma's got a sense of humor." I sat at my desk, pulled out my old notebook, the one I used to jot financial notes in during the worst days of the marriage, and flipped to the first page. There it was, my handwriting from a lifetime ago. "He took my money. He won't take my mind." I smiled and added a new line below it. "He never took my future either." Oh? The world outside was busy, loud, unpredictable. But inside my office, inside my life, everything finally made sense. It happened on a Thursday evening, almost 6 months after the divorce papers were signed. The sun had just dipped behind the skyline, leaving the house bathed in that soft, gold-gray light that makes everything look calm. I was in the kitchen, finishing a call with a new client for the second ledger, when I heard the knock. Slow, hesitant, the kind of knock from someone unsure they should even be there. I didn't need to check the window. I knew that rhythm. When I opened the door, Mark stood there looking like a man who'd aged 10 years and 6 months. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes hollow. There was no arrogance left, only exhaustion. "Hi," he said softly. "You look good." I leaned against the frame. "Can't say the same for you." He forced a laugh that fell apart halfway through. "Fair." He hesitated before asking, "Can I come in?" I thought about it for a moment, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. He entered slowly, as if the house might reject him. His gaze lingered on the framed photo of the second ledger newspaper feature hanging by the hallway. I could see the headline reflected in his eyes: "Wife turns betrayal into empowerment." He cleared his throat. "I read the article. They make you sound like a hero." I smiled faintly. "Guess karma's finally getting better press." He sat at the table, rubbing his hands together. "I deserve that." "Deserve?" I repeated. "That's a word you used a lot when we were married." He nodded. "Yeah. I used a lot of words I didn't understand." For a moment, the room was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I studied him, the same face I once loved, now softer, smaller somehow. The man who once measured success and status now looked like he was holding on by threads. He finally said it. "I lost the company." I didn't react. "I know." His head jerked up. "You do?" "Lydia mentioned it during one of her calls," I said. "Public record." He nodded slowly, shame spreading across his face. "The board forced me out. Tara left the same week. She said she didn't sign up for a man with bad credit and worse press." I looked at him, expression unreadable. That's the thing about people who use others. They always think they're exceptions to their own rules. All dode. He winced but didn't argue. "I've been trying to rebuild," he said. "Therapy, part-time consulting, paying back some debts. I'm not asking for sympathy. I just wanted to see you, to say I'm sorry." I crossed my arms. "You already said that the day you got caught. The difference now is, I believe you're sorry, just not for what you did. You're sorry for what it cost you." He swallowed hard. "You're right." "Of course I am," I said, not cruelly, just factually. He gave a weak smile. "You always were." For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he asked, "Do you ever think about us, about how things used to be?" I thought about our early years, the laughter, the shared plans, the small-town apartment where everything felt possible. Then I thought about the nights I sat alone while he texted someone else across the dinner table. "I think about the lessons," I said finally, "not the nostalgia." He nodded, looking down. "I deserve that too." Isayad. "Mark, you don't need to keep confessing. You're not at church. You're at the home of a woman who finally learned to stop living in apology." That stung him, but it was the truth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. "It's not everything I owe you," he said, "but it's what I've managed to save. I want you to have it." I looked at the envelope, then back at him. "You still don't get it." He frowned. "Get what?" "I don't want your money," I said. "I never did. I wanted your respect, and you had no idea how expensive that was." He looked like he might cry, but he didn't. Just nodded slowly, defeated. "I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me," he whispered. I tilted my head slightly. "You didn't ruin me, Mark. You just gave me the motivation to build something better." He let out a shaky breath. "You've really moved on, haven't you?" "Yes," I said simply. "And you can too once you stop measuring your life by what you've lost and start owning what you've learned." He stood up, eyes glistening. "Do you think there's ever a chance we could—" "No," I interrupted, gently but firmly. "We were a chapter, not the book." He nodded again, slowly. "You always did know how to end things clean." I smiled faintly. "That's what accountants do best." He tried to laugh, but it came out like a sigh. Then he walked to the door, hand on the knob, pausing just before leaving. "Elaine?" "Yes? Do you hate me?" I shook my head. "No. I hate what you did. But hating you would mean you still have space in my life, and you don't." He nodded, tears finally falling. You were right. I never saw what you'd do next." As he stepped outside, I caught his reflection in the window, small, fading, almost peaceful. When the door closed, I didn't feel triumphant or angry, just still. I went back to the table, picked up the unopened envelope, and tossed it into the drawer with the divorce papers. It didn't belong to my life anymore. The kettle whistled softly in the background. I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights blink like tiny reminders that life keeps moving, with or without apologies. And as I took that first sip, I realized something simple. I hadn't just survived his betrayal, I'd outgrown the version of myself who thought survival was the goal. Morning light always hits differently when there's nothing left to prove. I used to wake up thinking about survival, about what I needed to fix, protect, or hold together. Now, I wake up thinking about what I want to build next. It's been a year since the divorce. The second ledger is thriving. What started as a one-woman project has turned into a small network of financial mentors. We've helped over 200 women reclaim what was taken from them, not just their money, but their confidence. Some days, I still can't believe that the worst chapter of my life became the foundation for something that helps others rise. Every Saturday, I hold a workshop downtown. The women come in carrying everything from shame to anger, but they always leave standing taller. This morning's session was about financial self-defense, how to spot red flags before the betrayal even begins. I watched them take notes, ask questions, and exchange stories with that mix of pain and power I know so well. At the end of the class, a woman in her 50s raised her hand. "How did you know when it was over?" she asked. "When did you stop looking back?" I smiled. When I realized I wasn't angry anymore, I was grateful, because losing everything forced me to find myself. There was silence, then nods all around. I saw tears, but not the kind that come from sadness, the kind that means someone just remembered their worth. After everyone left, I stayed behind to clean up the room. I looked at the whiteboard still covered in notes and underlined one sentence I'd written earlier. "The best revenge isn't revenge, it's rebuilding so strong they can't reach you anymore." That line wasn't just advice, it was my reality. Later that afternoon, I sat in my office reviewing an email from a nonprofit that wanted to partner with us. They were launching a nationwide campaign to educate women about financial manipulation in relationships. They wanted me to lead it. I read the invitation twice, then leaned back in my chair, smiling to myself. There was a time when my life revolved around Mark's decisions. Now, organizations wanted mine. My assistant poked her head in. "You're still here?" "Just wrapping up," I said. She grinned. "You should go celebrate. You've earned it." I locked my computer and grabbed my coat. Outside, the city air was cool and alive. People rushed past with their own stories, heartbreak, hope, survival. I wasn't different from them. Just one of the lucky few who turned pain into purpose before it hardened into bitterness. That night, I stopped by a small restaurant near the river. The waiter seated me by the window, where I could see the lights reflecting on the water. I ordered a glass of wine and watched the world move. For once, I didn't feel like I had to be part of the noise. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Mrs. Foster?" a familiar voice asked. "This is Daniel from the bank. I just wanted to congratulate you. You were featured in our quarterly report, the section on community leadership." I laughed. "Well, that's one way to make peace with my banking history." He chuckled. "You've come a long way from the day we froze your husband's accounts." "Trust me," I said. "So have they." After the call, I sat for a long moment, wine glass in hand, thinking about how full circle life can be. The same system that once held me hostage now highlighted my freedom. When I left the restaurant, the night was quiet, soft wind, faint city hum, the kind of peace that doesn't need permission. Back home, I walked through the front door and took a deep breath. The house smelled like lavender and clean air. Every detail felt intentional. The plants I'd kept alive, the shelves lined with books I'd chosen, the framed quote hanging in the hallway. "You can't lose what was never truly yours." I won. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, the same one where, not long ago, I had stared out wondering how my life had fallen apart. Now, it was where I watched everything fall into place. The doorbell rang once, just one soft chime. I opened it to find a delivery driver holding a package. No sender name, just my address written neatly across the label. Inside was a letter and a small wooden box. The letter was short. "For what it's worth, I've learned. Thank you for forcing me to." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside the box was the same watch I'd bought Mark years ago for our 10th anniversary, the one he'd pawned off when things got bad. I turned it over. The engraving was still there. For every second we build together. I didn't cry. I didn't even sigh. I just closed the box and placed it in a drawer, right next to the divorce papers and the check he'd once tried to give me. Artifacts of a life I'd already outgrown. The clock on the wall ticked softly, the only sound in the house. Peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives quietly one day, sits down beside you, and stays. As I sipped my tea, I thought about the women I'd met through the second ledger, about the lives that would never again be silenced by deceit. That was my revenge. Not anger, not punishment, but legacy. Because in the end, Mark didn't take my future. He funded it. And the woman he tried to break? She built an empire out of the wreckage. The city lights flickered in the distance. I watched them until they blurred into gold and whispered to myself, not with bitterness but with gratitude. He moved the money. I moved the world. I didn't just survive Mark's lies. I outgrew them. The woman he underestimated became the woman he could never replace. That's the kind of revenge no courtroom, no apology, and no second chance could ever match. If you've ever been betrayed by a husband, or you've lived through your own cheating story, remember this. Your peace, your freedom, your power are the three things they can't transfer, delete, or hide. And maybe, one day, you'll look back not in anger, but with a quiet smile because you finally understand that the story was never about losing him. It was always about finding you. If you love cheating stories, revenge stories, and true tales of husband betrayal where strength and dignity win in the end, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your story might be the next one I tell, not about pain, but about power. Because every betrayal ends the same way. They lose control, and you find peace.